Yo, what's up, guys? I'm Deeon Brown, and you are listening or watching Man versus Brand. Man, we have a show for you. So, I had the fortunate chance to meet Deeon, and we had a conversation about this book that he has written. And a little bit about his experience, right? So there's a book. If you're watching this, I'll tell you the title in a second if you're listening. So he wrote this book, Sex, Drugs, and Jesus. Now, to be fair, the book title sounds very much in line with what we hear in the self-improvement space, right? Everyone wants to give you this really salacious title and hope that that drives readership, it drives interest. People become then curious about what its contents are, what the perspective is. And in this case, the book is very much about sex, drugs, and Jesus. Like there is no sort of salacious. It's not a hope to get you in. Like quite literally, it's like sex, drugs, Jesus, and timing. If I had to rename this, I would throw the word timing because timing plays such an important factor in this book. It's described as a memoir of self-destruction and resurrection. From a reader's perspective, and I had the opportunity to read the book a few weeks ago, it is a book that describes, from the author's perspective, self-destruction and resurrection. But it also describes the middle part, right? So if you guys are familiar with the parable of Jesus, and this is a parable that exists in many cultures, there's this idea of a wilderness, an idea of a waiting period, an idea of this interim period between revelation and wherever the person started with. And that typically indicates that they're sitting somewhere, waiting somewhere, journeying in some place. There's some part of their path that gets them from where they started to a point where they understand themselves and their lives a bit deeper. So it is a memoir of self-destruction and resurrection, but it's also a memoir of self-destruction to resurrection. It's a path of living to self-destruction. There's all of these sort of journeying points that you walk through as you're moving forward in this story that I think doesn't just land you square at one point. Sort of walks you through what got him from point A to point B and eventually to point C, where he's sitting right now. From a perspective, it's about 360 pages. Chapters read, it's a quick read. It's an intense read. It's a quick read. And so if you get an opportunity to, I would suggest that you guys check out Sex, Drugs, and Jesus. I'm going to talk to Deeon about his experience, not necessarily writing the book, because I think that's pedantic. A lot of folks will probably ask those questions. I want to talk about spirituality, religion, drug usage, and revelations from that, and how self-perception shifts and grows and evolves as we experience more of life. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about on Man versus Brand. He's looking up in the air, guys, if you're not watching, to understand what I'm asking, but it'll all make sense soon. This is Deeon Brown. That's Savannah Hubert. And Savannah, why don't you introduce yourself?
First of all, I'm not allowed to use cuss words on this show.
You are, but just we're gonna for the sake of the content try to articulate as best as possible so that we get our points across. So if you disagree with something, explain it and then F that versus F that and then explain. Cool?
Oh no. I mean, yeah. Thank you for explaining. As I cuss a lot. I used to be in the military, and it's true.
Okay.
I like a sailor, but I don't cuss to disagree. I cuss to emphasize. Those are
All
my
right.
adverbs.
We're here for that. I'm here for that. That works. That works. That works.
So hello everyone, how are you? My name is Deeon and I'm feeling fan-fucking-tastic today, and I trust that you are too, sending your positive vibes, positive energy. Oh honey, I'm just sending you life. Yes, and so I am the author of the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus memoir. I'm also the host of the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast, and I'm also the designer and retailer at Down Under Apparel, which is my online retail store. And I am so happy to be here today, Deeon. Thank you so much for having me, Lord. Blessings be upon you.
No. Thank me for having me, and thank me for having you too, right? Sometimes you got to also have yourself to have someone else be present with you, right? So thank you for both. All right, so I want to talk to you about concepts in the book, not necessarily a run through of the book itself, mostly because I want people to read the book, right? And if we just describe every point of the book, then in essence, we sort of change the experience. So let's talk about some themes that I think are present in the book, if you will.
Okay.
What do you see? Which I believe that is a theme in the book. The differentiation between religion and spirituality.
You're asking from like the way I wrote it or how I perceive the world today.
I think you can contextualize each in the way that you wrote the book, or where the place where you were during the book, and possibly how that's informed the way you feel about spirituality and religion today.
So the book covers like a more like immature part of my existence. The conundrum is, while I was living during all of those days, I thought I was more mature and more spiritually grown up than what I actually was. And then and now looking back on it, I was like, not only physically, like as a male growing up, was I not as mature as I thought I was. I also wasn't spiritually as mature as I thought I was. But when I was in my 20s, you couldn't tell me I didn't know, and everything like that. But I didn't know shit. And or at least not as much shit as I thought I knew. So religion in those days was my life, you know. And spirituality was like the expression of the religion. Um, Now looking back on it, religion is a reduction of God into a form which man can understand. And then spirituality is diverse across all kinds of various religions. I still feel like spirituality is an expression of somebody's faith or religion, but it's not just relegated to the Trinity or like God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost.
All right. So as you are moving through this book, not only do you discuss the idea of Jesus, but it's the idea of the many earthly advocates and representation of Jesus through human beings, and how their thoughts and their words and their actions also affected you. Right?
Yeah, I mean, there was. I'm not gonna say there was a lot of them, but the ones that were there were like incredibly impactful.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Like, so impact is the most important thing. Like,
right.
volume means nothing. Impact is everything. Um, so when you were going through the multiple stages, and guys, just to preface this, the book is broken up mainly into time periods that represent different stages of the Brandon's life. I feel like I'm telling your story while you're here. This is interesting. But it's broken up into different time frames. But there are also key individuals in those different time frames that represent that are representing thoughts around religiousness or spirituality that you are ingesting. And so how how is your relationship now that you're more mature in your understanding of God and your understanding of spirituality? How are those relationships to the individuals that were influencing you while you were in the midst of what was going on in your book?
Okay, y'all. I think what Deeon is alluding to is my time that I spent at Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas. That's like the most pivotal, like negatively pivotal, like religious moment in the book.
But there were some not only negative, but yeah, like just what's your relationship to those people that were impactful on your religious journey at that time?
Well, we'll start with the positive. My evangelist Nelson is my spiritual counselor. When people die, I don't really think of them as stopping to exist. As Alanis Morissette said it in that lovely one of her in that song "Thank You India." She said, how about we or just "Thank You" was the name of it. Was how about we not equate death with stopping? And I don't equate death with a cessation of being. And so she did physically die like 3-4 years ago. This woman was my spiritual counselor, highly clairvoyant woman, prophetess, seer, all that. Pastor growing up, all the way, till the end of her life. I was her personal servant / altar boy, as they call them at her particular church. And she was the face of anything positive.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know we don't always associate Pentecostalism with positivity, but she was unique. I really didn't feel like she belonged in that church. I felt like it reduced her. But Southern women, they tend to like to just get in their place and stay there and can't nobody convince them otherwise. But she was all the positivity. She was the one I would call when I was in trouble, and she would pray for me, and she would prophesy for me, and she would, stand, and block, death for me and entrapment and all this trouble and stuff that I otherwise would have fallen into. So she was everything positive. She's mentioned at the beginning of the book, at the end, you see her appear throughout, and she's a great, warm, motherly figure. My grandmother is too. She's the one who taught me how to read the Bible and everything like that. And so that's all the good shit. Now let's get to the bullshit. Now I take my ass to Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas.
I did want to give a spectrum because I think that and just to say this, I think that the title may indicate to some that this is a critical deconstruction of religion, right? Just by title. Like if I just started the title, I'd be like, oh well, the person must have not been happy with the church, and this is what happened. And there is parts of that are earned and right, but then there's also this sense, and that's why I think it was important to start the episode with this question around spirituality versus religion, because a lot of the people that seemed positively influenced in your life in this respect, they seem to be more spiritually driven than the structures that religion tend to place, right? Like hierarchy and things like that. And then you had this religious experience, which I think you're about to go into, that didn't really resonate, or this is toxic. Whatever. I'll let you tell it. Go.
I love the sound of your voice. It's perfect for this sort of thing. And so you can talk all you want. So the title Sex, Drugs, and Jesus is meant to be encompassing. And I want to appeal to people on the level of Jesus and let them know that sex, Jesus, and drugs are not mutually exclusive. You can have all three. and now another book that I have written that's going to be like a free book, though no less effort put into it. That one was going to be called "Don't Call Me a Christian." Now I am deconstructing religion, and that son of a bitch.
Okay.
And that's exactly what it's for. Look for that in the next couple of months.
Okay.
But, so I get out of the military. I did 6 years in the Air Force from 2000 to 2006. I'm in California. I should have stayed my ass in California, but instead I went to Texas. Lord Jesus, what did I do that for? Why? Because I'd seen Joel Osteen on TV. I thought it would be great. I was really big in the church. I volunteered at every church pretty much that I've ever been to. I'm really big into humanitarian work and all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm, hey, let's go to the biggest church in the country. You know, let's do the damn thing. So Lakewood Church, this is Joel Osteen Ministries, for those of you who may not have heard. So he's in that whole circuit with like Brian Houston and Hillsong Church and Joyce Meyer, TJ, you know, all your televangelists. And so I go there, I lock in really quickly. I'm a Sagittarius, otherwise intense. Whatever the fuck I do it. I run the shit into the ground and then I keep driving it further. And so I start teaching a kids group in the kids life ministry there. I become a volunteer supervisor of the kids life, of the other teachers in the kids life ministry. This is a few hundred children, you know, like every Wednesday night. Now I'm a worship leader in the same service too. And then on the weekends, I'm singing in the adult choir. This is probably the largest choir in the country. It's like huge and it's magnificent. And the music is just phenomenal. I applied for a job there because I'm so bought into everything they got going on. After about 2 or 3 years, they do a social media check. So MySpace had like just come out. So they checked my MySpace page and found out that I wasn't so straight. Before this, they had brought me into the office and asked me like if I had a girlfriend and all this and that, which I felt like was nosy and intrusive and out of place and probably illegal. But I rationalized it and I was like, well, no place is going to be perfect. You know how we do. These churches abuse us, or if we're in relationships, people physically abuse us, and we try to make it make sense in our head, and we just keep on going. I should have ran away right then when they started questioning my relationships and what the fuck I'm doing when I'm not at church. Instead, I just kept on going. And so they found my MySpace. I had like this cute ass photo of me on there with barely any clothes on because I was in my 20s and my body was snatched for the gods. And so I was flaunting that shit. So I don't judge you, baby. If you in your 20s and you got that 6-pack, that 4-pack, that bubble butt, bubble, you know what? Do it. Fuck it. Show it up. Show it off. Shit. And so they called me into the office, the kids life, the kids choir director and the adult choir director, to fire me from volunteering. They were like, we found your naughty photo on MySpace and we see you've been hanging out in Montrose. Montrose is the gay district in Houston.
Okay.
I never bought a boyfriend or dude I was fucking or whatever up there to the church. When I was at church, I was on Lakewood's time. And when I left, I held it up and did what the fuck I wanted to do. Because why not? They don't control my life, but they wanted to control my life. And they took it really personal, as though I had done something to offend them. They were like, how could you? How could you do this, you know, to us? And they use very go ahead.
Wait, so okay, so you hear about this in faith-based businesses, and in essence, these churches are businesses, right? So you hear this in the Chick-fil-A's of the world. You hear this in other in other companies where they represent this sort of value system idea, right? And that the value system is brought into, just to give context for the audience, so that they're not, so they understand how can one be let go, right? So it works in a lot of companies. A lot of companies have a value system specifically for people that are viewed in leadership, right? So corporations have it. The Disney Channel is infamous for how bad theirs is, specifically in relationship to their child actors and relationships and weight and sexuality and all that, right? Like, what happens though that I think is so problematic is twofold. The first is that unlike normal corporations, these religious institutions will oftentimes socialize you so that your friend network, your extended family network, your life is now encompassed in this organization. So not only are they firing you, they're removing key fundamental relationships that you may lean into on a daily basis. So it's not like a firing like, oh, I just got fired from Chase, I'm just gonna go to Bank of America. It's like my access to my family, the relationships that I fostered are now being called into question. The other thing that they do is, and this is a lot of institutions, it's not just about saying, hey, this person is leaving. It's about demonizing the person, right? It's about relegating the person to some level of pariahship that just by associating with that person, you are now lumped into their category. Which means if you do have advocates and do have people who love you, they have to make this very clear decision on whether they can survive the repercussions of just associating with someone for whom they have affection, for whom they have love, for whom they've built trust and relationship with. And so I just wanted to, while you were describing this idea that they let you go, just put into context. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to give away, but I just so that the audience understands what's at stake when you talk about being fired from something that you have been entrenched in on this level.
Yeah, child, there's so much content in this book. You can talk freely. There's no way we can give it away at all. Really two books in one, and I almost divided them into two books, and I was like, nah, let me just let them have it. You know, I don't like that tease either. I'm gonna let you get it or not. And so yeah, my middle finger was specifically to Chick-fil-A. I loathe and despise that corporation. And yeah, everything you said is spot on. When you remove somebody from like a ministry like that, I mean, those are the ministries that I wanted. So to tell me I can't do that anymore, you're taking away the thing that ties me to the church in the first place. So you stripped away my community. You dehumanized me, you know, and you made me feel like I'm, you know, like something other than what I was before I walked into that meeting. And now I'm there.
Before you had more information than you did before, which is the reality. You're weaponizing more information to dehumanize me, right? Like, which is sort of crazy because it's like if you would have hit it, we would have been fine with you, but because you're yourself and you are honest and transparent, which is what we say we want from you, because you're those things. Now we're going to weaponize that against you and make that the reason why you're no longer wanted.
Yeah, I mean, there's gay, but there's people who are queer on all over every church. I mean, the only thing you have is a facade. So what they want you to have is, if you're a dude, they want you to have a girl and some kids. Never mind if you fucking every boy in town. I used to have sex with so many straight married men back when I was a thought. Like it was like unreal. I'm like just totally such an easy dick to get from straight married men. And so
and guys, I don't know if that's a third book, but you know, there's some stuff there. There's some content in that. There's some content in that. But so you're at the church. They just let you go, and what's your world like?
Oh wait, I need to get a little bit more granular because the letting go was conditional. They offered me a conversion therapy package if in order to they were like, we're stripping you of all these ministries, but you can be demoted to being like an usher or a greeter. They had pre-selected these books that I'm sure had I accepted the package, it would have turned into counseling session. They were like, if you become ungay, you can work your way back up into our graces. And so that didn't end well. And then my world turned into searching for community in the nightlife. So that very night, after I threw my Lakewood church uniforms in the trash, I was like, well, where can I go where I'm not going to be judged? You know, I went to a gay bar. You know, I went out into the streets, and I had been going out to clubs before, but it had always been for entertainment, you know, to dance. I had never ever once gone out thinking I need to go here and feel like community and family. You know, I didn't know how much we seek community in tribes like that, and subconsciously I did this, and then that you know, and that's eventually what led me to becoming a drug dealer. But yeah.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that idea, right? So, in the book, and guys, I'm only going to describe my take on the book, right? Like, and that's why I think I'm being intentionally obscure a bit because I want you guys to read the book, and then you have a take on the book, and you contact Deeon and say, "Oh my God, I read your book, and here's what I got from it," because I imagine he loves that sort of engagement. So what's juxtaposed and or paralleled with this idea of the insight conversations and engagement around religion that's happening in the book, there is sort of this similar thing that's happening, but it's influenced by drugs, right? And so you are having these sort of intense experiences that straddle the line between what you're experiencing physically, what you're experiencing emotionally, and on some level, what you're experiencing spiritually, based on the evangelist. What you said her last name was again?
Evangelist Nelson.
Evangelist Nelson. She had, guys, in the end, she had some insight about this guy that he was dealing with, and what was happening in that space. But I want to talk about, like, while you were sort of in this space of usage, like, did you feel connected to some aspect of spiritual experience, of metaphysical experience? Were you experiencing not just sort of human sensory pleasure, but and pain, but also sort of connecting with something that felt a little bit larger, good or bad?
Nope. Not even in the slightest. It was pure filth and vanity because until I got kicked out of Lakewood Church, man, I had been in church pretty much all my life for almost, what was this? I was almost like 26, 27 years old. And I was so like conditioned to be in church. Like I didn't even know what Sunday Funday was. I'm damn near 30 years old and I don't know that bars are open on Sunday. Okay, so like the first Sunday after I got kicked out, I'm walking around the neighborhood. I'm having to ask the bartenders, like, why are you open? And they're like, okay, this is Sunday Funday. I mean, this has been going on for decades.
Yep.
Okay, I don't know. And so now I've been being so good all my life, from the church to the military, then back to the church. This is my chance to finally wild out. Like I said earlier, I wasn't as spiritually mature as I thought. So I let this experience with Lakewood Church cause it caused trauma, but I didn't go and heal that trauma. And so I didn't go to another church again for like about 5 or 6 years. Now, had I been as close to God as I thought I was, no matter what Joel did or his little minions and shit underneath him, I would never have let that come in between me and God, but I did let it come in between me and God because I was not spiritually mature. And I unfortunately see that happen a lot today when people get bitter about the church, things that have happened to them or to other people. Then they throw God out with everything, but it's not good to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so if you wouldn't like now, I don't go to churches. I don't fuck with them because they're not to be trusted. But I finally learned how to separate God from church and religion. And as I say, the further I get away from church, the closer I get to God. But when I was out there doing my drugs and shit, no, I was wilding out. I was doing everything that I never did while I was in church. I didn't talk to God. I didn't pray. I didn't do none of that.
So, okay. I'm trying to phrase this because it's interesting. So then I read something that feels very different in what you're explaining versus the book, and I'm just gonna take a second, guys, if you're watching or listening to this, to just reconcile my own understanding of the work, right? So there's a period of time in the breakdown of the book that focuses on the drugs portion, specifically this idea of delving into meth, right? But in that time period, you also sort of describe this emptiness that you were experiencing and how the drug was filling that space.
Right.
Or at the very least was a substitute for what you had previously experienced in the church or with religion or how you spent your time or what you were invested in. And so I guess the nature of my question is less like, did you wake up and thought you saw God in your bedroom, and more of a, as you're doing these drugs and you're feeling this space that was filled with this calling for a higher power, were you feeling connected to anything beyond just the experience of the drugs? Like, did you ever wake up and be like, God, like, why am I going through this? Or I must be moving through this because this is a part of my journey to get to the other side. And I get it. That's why I said maybe it was just pure human sensory. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. But I would imagine that if you're filling a hole with something that you used to feel that was where God was the nucleus, that maybe while you're going through this experience, you're also sort of questioning and investigating that relationship where now meth is filling a hole that was once filled with this, with the presence of this entity of God. And I guess that's where I'm sort of headed.
I knew that I was angry at Lakewood. I didn't realize that I was using the drugs to numb that pain. I didn't consciously realize that.
Okay.
Looking back on it, I do believe that that's what I was doing, because the first drug that I took was an ecstasy pill, and it made me feel so great that I started taking them every night. I would wake up, very, very angry at Lakewood Church, particularly. But, as I said earlier, I'm a very, very, very extreme individual. And so I went from being all in, and I just cut everything off, from God. And in the book of Revelation, I think around chapter 8, there's a passage that says, and there was silence in heaven, by the space of half an hour. So I went from talking to God all the time to zero for about 5 or 6 years. And I wasn't, no, I know what you're saying. Like when someone dies, whatever, and people go, God, why did this happen? And they're trying to reason with it. No, I just turned into like this bitter, angry person who just shut off all religion, all communications with God. I threw God away with Joel Osteen and everybody else, because unfortunately I had them packaged together when they never should have been.
Yeah.
And but no, I didn't like the depths of my like ire towards those people. And I don't fucks with them, anymore at any type of level, because what the fuck we got to say to each other.
Yeah.
But I'm like one of the biggest advocates against them now. Like I deal in very extreme, very, very extreme. I'm either all the way for you or I don't fucks with you. There ain't no in between. And when they broke my heart, I just didn't talk to God at all for like about 5 or 6 years.
Now there at the end of the book, which I also think is an interesting juxtaposition. Maybe not the end of the book, maybe the end of the story. You're dealing with a guy, Des. Is Des right name? Is his name Des?
In what capacity?
The guy at the end. The guy at the end. Like, so there's a guy that you're trying to get away from.
Oh, Nico.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. For some reason in my head, his name is Des. All right. So you're trying to get away from him, and the evangelist introduces this idea that there's a component of witchcraft, right? That there is this metaphysical thing that's also happening. Now, so now this introduces another portion of the spectrum of spirituality, right? This idea that not only are there these forces of good, but also these forces that are working against us. What's your take on that now? Like, do you believe in demonology? Do you believe in witchcraft? Do you believe that rituals can invoke things that specifically work against us? And how does that also inform your belief around God as it stands right now? Because it seems like in the course of that experience, you now have articulated this sort of spectrum of spiritual engagement.
Right. So thank you for that question, and thank you for not being afraid to tackle such a dark topic. So my job, the large part of my calling from Jesus Christ is to keep things well, to simply do what he said to do, which is to preach the gospel. The gospel simply meaning whatever the truth is, and preach means just open my mouth for something other than sucking dick. Okay. It's not my job to force people to believe. I'm gonna say what the hell happened. I'm gonna write it, I'm gonna video it, and you take it or you don't. And so, that I did what I was supposed to do. Now, is witchcraft real? So I want to be clear. Voodoo is like a religion. That's a whole like thing. Witchcraft is like a negative force that you're trying to like use to hurt people. In the magical circles and the spiritual circles, you're either trying to draw something to you, push something away, destroy something, build something up, something like that. Is it real? Yeah. Down here, like in New Orleans, by where I live, and in other places, there's all kinds of like, candle shops, magic shops. You can go in there and get this. You can go in there and get that. One time I was in one of those shops getting like some things to protect myself, and I asked this girl what kind of work she does. I don't ask people what kind of work they do anymore because the bullshit ass question anyway. Usually people don't really give a fuck. And she was all like, "Oh yeah, like the breakup couples and things like that." She said it very casually. So in like in the witchcraft world, it's called working on people. So like if somebody don't want to see this couple together, they want to see this business close or whatever, they'll be like, I'm going to work on that person. I'm going to work on that business in order to see them fall. And so what Nico did to me in this, I was 15.
Hold on. Can I pause you for a second? Yeah. So by work on, I'm not really familiar with the term, but I'm going to explain it as I believe, and then please correct me. So by work on, it means I'm going to invest energy, invest rituals, invoke malignant forces to act on my behalf in order to spiritually affect that thing, which will then result in a manifestation of it physically. So I'm going to work to get something closed, and it will eventually close, but I'm working in this spiritual space in order to affect this in the physical world. Is that what working on means? Like, that's what I'm hearing, but I'm not 100% sure if that's what we're talking about.
Exactly. And the opposite of that is like in the Bible, if it says to call those things that be not as though they are, or if somebody worships the universe, they may say, I'm going to manifest this until it materializes. Well, you can take that and flip it and do it negatively too. And so a person may burn a candle against somebody. They may go to somebody's house and sprinkle powder around it and shit like that when they're not there. It may not work the first time, so they may have to repeat that or try something different. So they are investing energy and time and consciousness into destroying somebody else, or to hurting them, or to causing them confusion. There's all kinds of shit that you can do to people. And I'm very transparent about my whole life, but especially witchcraft. Sometimes people be having weird shit happen to them and they think they're going crazy, or they try to rationalize it and be like, oh, that just couldn't be. Bitch, you might have somebody on your case, and you need to email me, so I can help you.
Somebody might be working on you. Somebody might be
working on you.
Somebody might be working on you. Watch out. Watch out.
You a fool if you think everybody around you is your friend. Because you ain't really got that damn many. Whoever you are. And so in this case, Nico, I was 15, he was 22. That's a whole other damn issue there. But he decided that he wanted to have me for himself, and we would meet like in the back of church and kind of kiss and make out. I was still a virgin, and he wanted to change that. And Evangelist Nelson stepped in between us and didn't let that happen. And then he got angry. And I didn't know. So the way it manifested with me is I started dreaming about him every night. It's one thing to dream about somebody every now and then, but every night for about 6 months. And whenever I would nod off, I would dream about him. His odor would come around me. So when somebody sends their spirit around you, there's astral projection as we understand it. But a person can send their spirit not into the astral plane, but they can keep it on this plane and they could send it to somebody else.
Well, does that so while you're describing that, is that also sometimes where people might have loved ones who are in a far distance or possibly who have passed and they smell them all of a sudden? So that may be like an affirmation of that person sending that I'm still with you. So they're sending that scent and sort of and giving you that trigger or that understanding that they're with you.
100%.
All right, cool. I'm with you. I'm with you. We working together. All right, cool. Let's go.
I see you. You're gonna be a shaman by the time this episode. But you see, you don't have to be dead to do those things, and people who have access to that ability can do it. And so, what Nico would do is send his spirit around me. And one time, he got a hold of my windbreaker. This is back in the '90s when we still had windbreakers.
Shout out to Colombia.
I said what?
I said shout out to Colombia.
Okay. So that he got a hold of my windbreaker, and that bitch would not give it back. And so what you do, if you can get a hold of somebody's personal item, you can use it to strengthen whatever spell you're working against them. If you want to get really personal, if you get a hold of somebody's hair, blood, semen, vaginal fluids, anything like that that comes out of them, you could really fuck a person up with that. And so he did not want to give me that damn thing back. And when I finally did get it back from him, his odor was so infused into it. No matter how I washed it, I could not get that man's scent out of my fucking clothes, and I had to throw it away anyway. And so what he did, he was able to get a hold of my soul and like run off with it. And because I was not happy unless I was around him. And then when we had that rift, when he wanted to have sex with me, it's like it took and it tore my soul up. And I remember just these searing pains. Like it was like my chest had lava coming out of it. And I remember being on my knees holding my mom's hand, just trying to get some sense of comfort because I was miserable every morning, noon, and night for 6 months. And what he did, I come to find out years later, besides running around trying to intentionally give people HIV and AIDS because he had that and he died when he was 24. So there's a candle called an Tranquil candle. And if you read the back of it, this candle talks about searching the nether realms to find a wandering spirit, to enlist this spirit to go and vex the person who's the object of your desire. And this spirit is going to go and take joy from this person until they come and be with you. It's a really fucked up thing to do to somebody you claim to love. But
wait,
that is
called a tranquil candle. So it is invoking non-peace. So tranquility is peace and joy and fulfillment. And so this thing is inversing that and causing confusion, chaos, restlessness, unhappiness to the person that you're trying to affect.
Right. And the only time that person has peace is when they are in your presence. And that's exactly how I was with him.
Wow.
Now, Evangelist Nelson was able to break that spell off of me, but it took time. Some stuff in the spirit you can do quick. And, she would always say, Devan, and some things take time. Then one Sunday morning, I was not at church. I was at home doing math problems, and I felt that heavy ass weight, oh my God, like lift off of me. And I never had a problem with him, like that again. But it is inverted thinking for you to be that fixated on somebody, to feel like you have to have them all to yourself, to do dark magic, to invoke the help of demons. There is something wrong in your understanding, because anything that's for you to have, you can go to God to get that. If you don't want to believe in God, some sort of positive being, you don't need to go and consort the help of devils, but because they're going to make you pay for that shit one day. But he did that. And I felt just like a ghost of a person, like a shell, walking around. And you see people, well, I mean, I guess you know how to pay attention to it from time to time. But to answer your question, is witchcraft real? Yes. Do people run around trying to fuck up people? Absolutely, because I've seen it done before. All
right. So listen. So you brought up something interesting, which I think is worth spending a minute or two on, which is the idea of the price of something, right? Because all of it comes with a price, right? Price may be sacrifice, price may be discipline, price may be action, price may come from your connection to something holy. Price can come from something in your connection to unholy, right? So what is something for which you wanted to manifest happen positively in your life, and what do you believe that you paid in order to get that done?
I only believe that like paying to get it done aspect, if somebody is going to work with like Satan in order to get it, because he's not your friend. These people are going after destroying people or greed, which are things that are not of God.
Okay.
So, but since I believe in the Trinity, all I have to do is believe and have faith in order to get what I want. It doesn't cost me anything but faith, and Jesus made that really simple. So I don't.
Well, but here's the thing, right? Like sometimes your faith does require of you things. There is a cost, right? So I'm gonna sort of push back a bit and say that I do believe that there's a cost. I do believe that that in order to create space for a new relationship, you may have to divest yourself of the relationships that are causing you harm. The cost is, even though I love these people and I think they're great, my spirit may tell me you got to get rid of those people in order for you to actually get the people that you want. You may actually have to get rid of that job and leave that job and work on faith to get in the space that you want to be. You may actually have to give up drugs to find joy. There is like, it's not just like, oh, we're just going to compound things, but there's also a certain amount of discipline and sacrifice that says not only is my faith spoken, but my faith has action. And if this is the action that I need to undertake in order for this thing to happen, then I submit myself to doing that action in order to create this result.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that's like the same thing. I think that's just a working faith without works is dead. It's the work that the faith would act ultimately lead. Listen, I'm not ultra religious or spiritual, so I'm just giving you.
I call that due diligence. I would not call that cost.
Okay.
Cost to me is like a negative thing. Like, so if I do some black magic, some dark magic to hurt somebody and take something from them that they want, well, then God is going to take that from me. See, that's going to cost me.
Okay.
But if I want this other thing and the Lord wants me to do some due diligence, physical effort, which may mean letting something go, I don't equate that with cost like that. I equate that with me doing my part as I work in tandem with the Lord.
Sure.
And if anything he's going to tell me to let go of is something that's not serving me anyway. So to me, that's not something that costs me something. But I could see how I get your understanding on that. We just had two different understandings of the same word.
Okay. And I think that's fair. But so back to my original question, which is, I guess, to reframework it, was something that you wanted, that you then understood the due diligence for and said, I'll participate in that, or I'll do this action in order to make this thing work for me.
Once I got back to Louisiana and I realized that as a military veteran, I could have a service-connected disability pension, which pays me money every month. By this time, I had been out of the military for 15 years and didn't know about this. They don't really make it easy when you get out of the military. They're not really trying to pay veterans. And so I learned of it and I began that fight. It took about 3 to 5 years, for me to win that battle. I put it on my vision board and everything like that. And along with it, if you achieve a certain level of service-connected disability, they erase your student debts, no matter how much student loan debt, no matter how much it is. So I had a picture of like an eraser erasing student debt, had a picture of a house that I wanted because I needed the pension in order to pay for it. And so my due diligence, besides praying and manifesting it and all of that, was battling with the Department of Veterans Affairs. And perhaps you've heard the stories of what a nightmare it is, going back and forth to all these doctors and the paperwork and them denying claims for no damn good reason. So I did about a 3 to 5 year battle with the VA along with praying to get my pension, but eventually I did.
And so, aside from just attributing that to wanting this thing, you're also maybe articulating that your persistence and continued effort to pursue this end was also in relationship to what you believed God, universe, whatever that aspect is, right, also wanted for you. So it's not just I'm doing this because I want it. I also feel like there are emissaries, there are things that are working on my behalf, and I just need to keep moving forward with these activities until this thing breaks and I get the result that I'm intending. Is that about right?
Yeah, you could say that. And spirit would send me like dreams and stuff to encourage me to keep going, or like things like that. Because I'm a gifted dreamer. I've been dreaming spiritually since I was about like 5 years old. With the exception, the only time my dreams went dark was after I fucking got kicked out of Lakewood Church, and then I didn't dream for like years until I started getting back close to God. But yeah, so yeah, and there was times I thought about giving up and stuff like that, and and the Lord would tell me to keep going. I thought about closing my lingerie business back at the beginning of it, and the Lord would send me, He sent me a dream telling me not to close it, and so I would say that the things that I've wanted to do have been in tandem with the Lord. Otherwise He would have told me to stop. I wouldn't have let it start to begin with.
So you write this book, right? You write the book. Why did you decide to write the book? Because writing a book, it now is in authorship can be a very individualized process where where in this book you're moving through a lot of trauma, you're moving through a lot of pain, and just even when you're writing motivational books, it is from an energy perspective draining to pour that much into it. So what drove you to write the book? And then my follow-up question was going to be, what sustained you through the process? So I'm going to ask you both at the same time, hoping that you can connect the thoughts for us.
Because a written testimony is better than a spoken one. You see, and I had enough sense to understand that I had received many strong deliverances, like from being a drug dealer and being homeless on the streets of Houston, and being in and out of jail. When you get something like that, you have to. For me, I had to put it in some kind of package so that it could benefit other people. And for me, that was not standing up in church on Sunday, because there's no way I could tell all of that, in one, quick couple of testimony services or whatever. So I started taking notes in 2012. I didn't actually sit down with an outline for this book till about the time the corona came to town. So what's that, about 10 years of notes? And then I compiled it into an outline. So what sustained me was the fact that I'm still alive. And I could have been dead after all the things that I did. And then of course the spirit would come along with dreams and encourage me and everything like that. So it took like a good year, from the time the outline was done before the book was like ready. And then purpose is everything. They always tell us in podcasts, what's your why? Alex and Felipe over at Podmatch always says that, what's your why? Why the fuck is you doing what you're doing in the first damn place? And so it was to tell this so that people can see what I've gone through. Sometimes I think, man, had I known other people who had HIV, who had hepatitis B, who had, a criminal record, rather than thinking I was the only one, maybe I would have made different decisions. And so I try to be transparent so that at the very least people can know that they're not the only one.
Absolutely. So when you look back at your life, right, and the many stages that are articulated as chapters in this book, and then on to your more current life, right? Like your lived experience right now. Um, Aside from being alive, which you just clearly articulated as being what sustains you, what have you now found to be joy for you? Like, right? So in a space where you were in service in the military, in service to church, in service to drugs, in service to people, right? Like, it sounds like you have a service driven life, but then what drives joy from someone who has spent so much of their time in service? What does joy look like for you now?
More service. So writing a book is a service to the world, at least, because the stuff I do is not entertainment. This is functional things that you can use. Nothing against entertainment, everyone's got their space, but this is service for me.
Yep.
Hosting my podcast, even selling lingerie, that might not seem like service to people, but when you have, like, say, my store carries plus size clothing for people who previously could not feel sexy because they couldn't find anything to fit them, now they feel better about themselves and their self-esteem was lifted. This sort of thing prevents suicide, people self-harming themselves, and then going out there and hurting other people because they're able to let that internalized bitterness go, all because they're able to feel sexual. Us being in touch with our sexual selves is gargantuan because God invented sex, not people. And so if you are not a sexual person and understand that can cut off like your creativity and energy and all kinds of shit. And so whatever. So I'm serving the world through like media and like and stuff like that. Now, if you ask me like what I like to do for fun, I have a garden in the back. I had 2 cats running around, but even my little cats, that's still service work because I got one from a shelter, one from a barn. I feed people out the garden, but I do get in my hot tub though, and that's just for me.
All right, there you go. Wait, so you brought up something, and this is what we're going to close on before I ask you to the 2 questions that I ask everyone, and then talk to you about how people can get in contact with you more. So you did mention this idea about humans being sexual beings.
Mm-hmm.
And very early on in my life, I was able to connect with someone who suffered a physical disability that left them in a wheelchair. And then I also spent about 6 months caring for someone who moved from being HIV positive into having full blown AIDS. This was like early 2000s, and the story is relevant. I'll tell the story on a different time on the podcast. But I sat with these 2 people, and it's the most interesting thing to me, the most beautiful thing to me is both of them, out of everything in the world, out of just the idea of affection, the idea of friendship, the idea of wanting more time, they both really were just like, I just want some good sex. Like, it's crazy, right? Because you would think that it would be all these other things, but then you realize in talking to certain communities that the idea of someone still being able to own desire, to own sexual identity, to own the want to be wanted is removed from them by people who then say you shouldn't want to be engaged in sex. Like, you, person in a wheelchair, should just be a person in a wheelchair. I just want you to stay disabled. Or you, person who is positive, be positive, be fun, be an advocate. But like, I don't really want to hear about you having sex because I want to divorce the way that I think about you in that way. What's your feelings on that? Do you feel like that's changing? Do you feel like that's a thing? Do you feel like that's individual? Because I've talked to a lot of people who have shared that sort of experience of feeling like their ability to be a sexual being got removed from them when a certain thing happened to them, and they actively fight to affirm and to engage with that part of themselves, and to ensure that they're engaging with people who see them not only for what the condition is, but also for the fullness that they can bring. That also includes sexual interaction.
I love problems, HIV, and various ailments because one thing that they do is they help us to refine our circle of associates. Because people who don't want to fuck with you, be friends with you, or think anything less of you, you didn't need the motherfuckers anyway. But you see, when everything was good, that same rotten ass person was still around you, but you didn't realize what a devil they were and what a black heart they had until you had that problem. And so, in that aspect, it's a blessing because it reveals the true nature of people. Now, the people who think less of people, those of us who have HIV or have some sort of, physical ailment, okay, they're not very far along in their journey because that sort of thinking is low on the vibration scale. It does not come from a positive, loving space, and for somebody to think like that, that is simply a peek into the window of their soul, which is not very bright. Okay. And so in terms of us feeling sexual, one thing that I do love is how, like, in the underwear world, in the fashion world, they've started using say military veterans and models who only have one leg. Abercrombie and Fitch makes a point of using models who are in wheelchairs and things like that in order to combat that stigma. Because, honey, if you think there's nobody out there with a fetish, okay, with a wheelchair fetish, okay, or with some other type of fetish, honey, no, trust me, yeah. And so I commend people, for being able to maintain, their sexual desires and to view themselves as beautiful, because what is attraction? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. There is no set form of what's supposed to be hot or attractive. It is anything, any weight, any size, any body type. Society wants to rob us of that. When I got HIV, I stopped having sex with people. I hear this is the way a lot of females respond to it. I took the more female approach to it. And a lot of it is because of the way I had been pumped up to view having HIV. It never looks pretty. It's never painted sexy. At least back in those days, they've gotten better about that now, but this is back in like the 2012, 2011 era. So, but that's because as people are starting to be sexy and out with these diseases now and with these problems, it's going to take time for us to get that out of our head.
It's like, listen, it's even, I think, elderly individuals sort of also have that thing, right? There's a moment when society as a whole deems you no longer viable for sexual activity, right? They're like, you're blind, you don't get sex. You're in a wheelchair, you don't get sex. You're positive, you don't get sex. You're too old to be having sex, right? But then a lot of those decisions also seem to be circumstantial around things like economics, right? So you can be old, but if you're wealthy, then it's fine. But if you're not, then it's not, right? And so you start there starts to become this thing of, even within this kind of robbing of agency around being desirable and desirability in sex, there's also like hierarchy around, like, okay, well, you're good for it, right? And you're not really good for it, but we'll make a pass for you, and we'll not make a pass for you, and we'll make a pass for you, right? A good example to me is the distinction of bodies and weight. To your point, right? Like, you could be obese or what is determined to be obese, right? And someone be like, "Oh, you're being too sexual." You can be completely emaciated, and people say you're model-esque, you're valuable, you're desirable, right? And so, in the confines of weight as being a determiner of desirability, we start to just create our own calls of what works and what doesn't. Because the idea is, if we're going to say that weight is a part of the structure, then everything on the ends of the spectrums should have this same response. But in fact, it doesn't. it's like if you're on the side that's preferred by men, possibly, then you're in good standing. If you're in the side that's not in this culture with men, then you're not. And so it's interesting to see how that hierarchy plays out. Where people are like, this one space is acceptable, but this one space is not, right? Like, you're good to have sex if you're positive and undetectable. But if you can't use the term undetectable, for some reason that thing seems to shift in how people view it, right? And so and I've done a lot of work in just trying to look at spectrums and understand behavior. And it's so interesting to see how folks make these kind of judgments on whether a person should have access to desirability based on these standards that they set that aren't really sort of set in stone.
Well, like Jesus said, judge ye not, so that you don't be judged. What people need to do is learn how to get into a space of, okay, I'm not into that body type, but I have mad respect for it. It's not my thing, as opposed to there's something wrong with that body type. That's two different. That's a slight shift, but it's one is super harmful and the other one is not.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I can say of that. Just like the people, just like before, people who think like that, like there's something wrong with that person. That person has something wrong with them. Yeah. When we become happy, healthy, and whole, then we give people freedom to be themselves. And again, people have to get away from people. If you're around people who think you're too fat, so you're not sexually desirable, fuck them. Go and find somebody else. There's plenty of people out there who love thick people, hairy people, and all of that. I experienced that before. I'm super hairy. I haven't always, I'm super hairy and stuff like that. When I was hanging around these little smooth, the twinks and everything like that, they were trying to act like something was wrong with me. I didn't know it at the time, but all I had to do was go down the street to the Bear Club, and I would have been just damn fine. But what did I do? I internalized that, and I went and shaved all my hair off because I thought off my entire body for years because of that experience, because I thought something was wrong with me because of what them two little skinny ass twinks in the gay bar told me. Fuck them. I could have been being like, I could have been like everything.
You could have been Bear Universe. You could have been Mr. Bear Universe 2013. And
right? I could have had all of this.
Ruined it all for you. See that? Look at that. All right, so listen, Savannah, I have two questions for you. First is, what's something on any streaming platform, a book or podcast that you recently engaged in that you thoroughly enjoyed?
Oh my God, a streaming platform. Oh my Jesus Christ. I'm really fond of the of how to change your mind on Netflix, because it deals with like hallucinogenics and their therapeutic value. Being someone who has a history of like OCD and PTSD and everything like that, I've begun a hallucinogenic journey. I like that because it's practical, it's useful, and it's something that's very on trend.
Okay. What's something that you watched on any streaming platform, podcast, or book that people that know you may not necessarily associate with the fact that you like it, but you thoroughly actually enjoy it? This could be genre, it could be something specific, but what do you like that folks that know you may not necessarily know that you like, but that you thoroughly enjoy?
That's a tough one. I'm so damn transparent. I don't have very many like secrets, and stuff like that.
Really like the last podcast, and it may not come in the order of this one, but the last podcast that I taped, the person was like, I love cheesy horror. And I was like, wow, let's talk about cheesy horror for a bit, right? So it may just be that, like, I don't know, you like watching people clean houses that are hoarded. I don't know. I don't really know what the thing might be, but like, is there anything that like maybe when you're just on your downtime and you just kind of want to clock into something, it's not something that you're going to post about. It's not something you're going to like call a friend and be like, yo, you need to watch this. But like for you, this thing is gold.
For me, it would be like not something I would watch, but something I would do that I wouldn't tell. So like, I wouldn't. So whenever I fly on a plane, I like to fly first class. Okay. I got like that, during the pandemic, I was like, less people up here, less coronavirus. I'll be like more likely to survive. Then I got spoiled when I was up there. Now I can't go back. But I wouldn't in a million fucking years, not in a million damn years, go on social media and post something like that because of the way it can make people feel, how it can make me look. And I know people put they're flying here. I don't check in the places. Nobody knows where I'm at. None of that. That's my indulgence that I keep from people, and people may not know that about me. Well, I didn't told it now, but in terms,
can I give you an alternate? Can I give you an alternate viewpoint? Because this woman calls me. She's like, she has means and opportunities. She's an amazing woman. And she calls me and she's like, I'm like her. Am I doing too much person? Like she called me and she's like, am I doing too much? And I'm like, and I'm telling her like, yeah, no, whatever the thought is, right? She's like, I think I want to fly first class. Pandemic is happening. I think I want to fly first class. But I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if I'm saying that to be in the regular cabin is problematic or whatever, right? So this is what I told her, right? Which is funny because now that I hear you, I'm like, maybe this is what she was trying to say. But I was like, listen, here's what's happening. We're better off in the back of the cabin with the woman with the 3 kids that's wiping everything down than you are with the guy who's sneezing and doesn't cover his mouth because no one can reprimand him in his life because he's a person who seeks out first class. I was like, sit next to the mom. The mom is going to take care of you. The mom's going to make sure not only your seat, her kid's seat, she's going to wipe down her seat, your seat, and her kid's seat. She's going to give you hand wipes. She's going to have a clean pen if you're flying abroad. I was like, the guy in first class is going to sneeze in your direction. It's going to get all over your cheese balls. And you're probably going to end up with
COVID. Actually, it's the opposite.
But that's been my experience when I've flown whatever, right? Is that people tend to be a lot more forgiving with etiquette because it's like a sneeze. It's like being loud on the phone. It's like the things that don't happen in the cabin because I think the volume of people starts to make people conscious about behavior. I found that like in the upper portions of the plane, it isn't so much because everyone's typically kind of doing their own thing. So I thought it was funny that I kind of had a whole different opinion on it. But now that I'm listening to you, I'm like, I kind of see where she might have been coming with that. Because I was like, girl, you'll get in the back with mom who is sanitation ready with everything.
You can write your own shit down, though. You don't need her to do that.
You don't. But we're talking about what other people do, not your own responsibility. I just thought it was funny that you mentioned that because I had a very different take. And now that I'm listening to you, I'm going to call her when this episode's over and be like, well, you know what? Maybe just don't sit in the middle chair if you're going to sit in the cabin. Middle chair.
Let me be clear. I fly American Airlines pretty much exclusively. So I don't know what they're doing on Delta, United, and all them other first class bitches. Now, you might have had some tragedy over there. But on AA, on American Airlines, we keep the classy up front. It kind of feels like an exclusive club, but we really lock arms, and I feel like the synchronicity and the energy, or maybe that's me shifting the energy that way when I'm up there, but I haven't had those experiences.
Also, it might be like the cities that we're coming from, right? Like she's flying from New York to LA, and I was just like, listen, you might.
Yeah. I'm always going from Baton Rouge to Dallas. Everything down here goes through Dallas, and then
I could just see those. I could see the energy being a lot different and less intrusive and more.
Southern
I'm
hospitality.
a New Yorker, so New Yorkers, I love you and I love LA. I'm not saying that, but we know how we are. So putting that out there. All right. So
I'll be in New York in about 3 weeks. So
all right, let me know. Let me know when you come up here, man.
First weekend in November, I'm coming up there to do some LSD
well,
in a therapeutic setting, sort of thing.
Right, well, let's do a breakdown after you're done and see what revelation came from it. I won't see you during or before, but maybe after we can talk about kind of what revelations came from that. All right, so Deeon, why don't you give the audience that's listening and watching a way to engage in more of your material?
For all my complexities, I keep this much simple. sexdrugsandjesus.com. That is all.
Okay, done deal. Listen, guys, thank you so much for listening, for watching Man vs. Brand. Savannah, thank you. I want you guys right now to stop and go check out the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. Pause this right now. Go over there. Pick up the podcast. Check it out. Listen to what he's doing. Listen to the conversations he's having because clearly it was an interesting conversation here on Man vs. Brand. So I imagine the conversations there are going to be amazing. So check that thing out. I love you all. Appreciate your time and listening in on the conversations we have over here. I love you guys.